Many of you only know the current version of Donald Trump and therefore find it very easy to form a negative association and dismiss his existence as that of a crazy old man. It would be a mistake to dismiss how one man's tremendous drive and sheer determination to succeed has directly influenced American culture for the last 40 years and continues today. Let's look at how we got here by doing a deep dive into the history, the rise, and the transformation into America's favorite bad guy. We'll look at how he cultivated and has maintained his unlikely connection to the average working class population, including how relatable to all walks of life he has made himself. He has skillfully managed to exist in both the world of the elites as well as those who could only dream of that lifestyle. In true devil's advocate fashion, save your judgment and hold your opinion to the end after we look into the life of Donald Trump. We'll look at some of the most important phases of his life: the early years, the rise, the arrival, the superstar, the decline, and the presidency. This isn't a celebration, nor is it a condemnation of the man, his life, and his actions, but instead, it will offer a look into what has been a lifelong story of a relentless pursuit to succeed.
I know what trending is better than anybody in the world. I've been trending my whole life. From the day I was born, I've been trending.
I like the good publicity and I like the bad publicity. It all plays.
Rich, ruthless, and famous, known for the buildings he's built and the wives he's divorced.
He played Monopoly, but more than Monopoly, he played with building blocks. Always.
Donald Trump was born in Queens, New York, a river away from the gleaming skyline of Manhattan. He was a middle child of 5 kids, the son of an immigrant mother from Scotland who ran the Trump home and who was known for her charitable work in the community. But in Trump's telling, his father was his greatest influence.
My father built low and moderate income housing in Brooklyn and Queens.
His dad made a big fortune taking advantage of post-World War II government programs that funded affordable housing complexes during New York's rapid growth. By all accounts, Fred Trump was an obsessively hard worker, saying that he was successful because he could, quote, squeeze 9 days of work into a 7-day work week. Growing up, young Donald was the rich kid on the block. But even still, his hardworking father forced him to have a newspaper delivery route to teach him hard work. Though apparently when it rained, his dad would drive him around on his newspaper route in his Cadillac, Fred Trump focused on teaching his son the ways of the real estate business, taking young Donald to construction sites from a very young age. He instilled in his son a deep drive to win. He would tell Donald that he was raising him to be a king, and that he must become a killer at anything he did. He was tough on Donald because he wanted him to be a winner. At school, Donald Trump was, in his own words, aggressive. His music teacher, who died in 2015, once said that, quote, there are certain children who need attention all of the time. He was one of those. And even punching that music teacher in the face, apparently giving him a black eye, because, quote, I didn't think he knew anything about music. I mean, he was like in elementary school. But it does show you some of this personality that starts to shape up from a young age. Trump says in his book that he focused on creating mischief because for some reason, quote, I liked to stir things up. I liked to test people. It wasn't malicious, it was just aggressive. You can read a lot more about this in his book, The Art of the Deal.
One of the great choices I ever made in terms of success was the choice of going to NYMA, New York Military Academy.
Trump's father, Fred, obsessed with hard work and discipline, sent Donald to military boarding school to live full-time when he was just 13 years old. And this is where Donald Trump really starts to thrive.
It was a good education. It was a good training. I enjoyed it.
From my reading, this military academy was pretty intense. It was a place where, quote, physical brutality and verbal abuse were tolerated and encouraged, both in hazing new students and physical disciplining from teachers. Trump actually thrived on this kind of intense structure. It helped fire up his competitive nature, and soon he would be getting good grades and winning medals for things like having the cleanest room, or the shiniest shoes, or the best made bed. all while going around telling fellow students that, quote, I'm going to be famous someday. Trump was super into baseball. His baseball coach recounts that, quote, Donald always had to be number one in everything. He would do anything to win, and he wanted people to know that he was first. So teenage Donald Trump spends the school year thriving at military academy, eventually rising to the rank of captain over the rest of the cadets, and then spending summers back in Queens working with his dad, learning the ways of the real estate business. Both of these experiences are very formative and lay the foundation of who he will become and what he will do in his future. That future continues when he goes off to college.
I went to an Ivy League school. I'm very highly educated. I know words. I have the best words.
Trump gets into college, and he still doesn't know exactly what direction he's going to take. He considers going to film school in LA to become a filmmaker.
My other fantasy as I got older was to do movies. I wanted to be a movie man. Down the hall and to the left.
Thanks.
I like keeping a low profile.
But ultimately, he decided to follow his father's path. He studies economics and business, and this is like during the 70s. There's a war going on in Vietnam. Young men are being recruited, but Trump qualifies for an educational deferment, meaning he gets out of the draft 4 times because he's going to college. Once he got out of school, he would have been eligible for the draft, but he qualified once again for a deferral because of a problem with his heel bone. Though there is some controversy around this, because the doctors who wrote Trump's deferral recommendation both lived and or worked in buildings owned by Fred Trump, Donald Trump's dad. And there's some speculation as to whether or not he actually did have a heel spur, or whether or not these doctors were doing Donald Trump's dad a favor by making it so his son wouldn't be sent off to war. Either way, he didn't go to war, and instead starts working for his dad's thriving real estate business, building lower and middle income apartment buildings in Brooklyn and Queens. And then there's this moment in 1964 that shows us another important part of his personality. There was this huge bridge in New York that had just been completed. It was a massive feat of engineering, connected Brooklyn to like Staten Island or something. Fred Trump was invited to the opening ceremony of this bridge, and he invited his son Donald to be present. Donald sat there in the crowd and noticed that during this celebration of the bridge, the guy who actually designed the bridge was there, but he was just off in the corner. Quote, no one even mentioned his name, recalls Donald. He goes on to say, quote, I realized then and there that if you let people treat you how they want, you'll be made a fool. I don't want to be made anybody's sucker.
They just took us for a bunch of suckers.
This is a huge one. That for Donald Trump, it's not just about winning. It's that you must fight for recognition. That if you're not the center of the show, you're a sucker. Recognition and attention matter a great deal to Trump from a very young age. Okay, so Trump joins his dad's business and he starts really learning the ways.
And I started off making little deals in Brooklyn and Queens with my father, and they seemed to work out.
He's only in his 20s, but he quickly runs into some big issues that would redirect the course of his life. At this point, we're in like the 1970s. The Civil Rights Act had just passed, which made it illegal to discriminate against people based on their race. And to enforce this, the US government, the Justice Department, would send agents undercover around to different apartment complexes to make sure that landlords weren't discriminating on who they rented to. This was a routine thing that they were doing, and it eventually happened to the Trump apartments. The DOJ would send in a black person undercover to apply for an apartment, and they quickly started to see a pattern where black or Hispanic people would be told that there was no available units in that complex. And then right after, the DOJ would send in a white person looking for the same type of apartment, only to find that suddenly there was room in that apartment complex. Department of Justice officials did this over and over and started to see a pattern of systematic racial discrimination. And on one day in 1973, Trump and his dad are hit with this lawsuit. The United States of America v. Fred Trump, Donald Trump, and Trump Management, Inc. The DOJ is hitting him with this lawsuit over allegedly discriminating against people based on race or color. They found that managers would mark rental applications with a C, indicating color. But yeah, these are one of these rental applications, and this may be the C that they are referring to here in the remarks section. I don't actually know, I haven't verified that, but in one testimony, a doorman for Trump's property said that he was directed to tell black applicants that the rent was twice as much as it actually was. And then when they asked the super why they denied certain applicants, the super replied that he was, quote, doing what my boss told me to do. I'm not allowed to rent to black families. The DOJ found that this was widespread, happening all over in Trump's at least 14,000 units. This lawsuit was a pretty huge deal. It was one of the largest fair housing cases at the time. Here's the New York Times front page the day after this came out. Major landlords accused of anti-black bias in city. 27-year-old Donald Trump was furious. But instead of admitting to these allegations and settling with the DOJ, he fought back.
People see me as a fighter. I think people have always seen me as a fighter. They know that I don't take a lot of crap from people.
The Trumps responded by countersuing the Department of Justice for $100 million, claiming that they made false statements. Now, the judge dismissed this suit outright, saying that there was no basis for it. But even still, the Trumps fought on. During this time, Trump said that, quote, I'd rather fight than fold, because as soon as you fold once, you get the reputation of being a folder. So he kept fighting for years, even though there wasn't really a solid defense there. And finally, he was forced to fold. But watch how he does it. Watch what he prioritizes. He strikes a deal with the DOJ that allows him to admit no wrongdoing, but that would require him to make a bunch of changes, like emphasizing that his apartment complexes are open to people of all races, taking out ads in the paper saying that Trump apartments actually do welcome black renters. But he didn't have to admit any guilt, and that is a point of pride for him.
We settled the suit with no admission of guilt. It was very easy to do.
Fighting no matter what means never admitting you're wrong, regardless of the circumstances, never apologizing, never folding. It's something that all humans do. They evade responsibility, but Trump has kind of made a brand out of it. It's a pattern that we'll see over and over. But anyway, a bigger point I want to make here is that this whole lawsuit really turned Donald Trump off of his dad's business. He didn't like this whole renting to middle and lower income tenants. It was causing too much trouble for him. Remember, he grew up in a rich New York City family with a reputation and connections. He had a taste for prestige and luxury and wealth and attention, and none of that was out here in Queens. So in his early 30s, he starts to turn his attention across the river toward Manhattan, the epicenter of wealth, prestige, excess, and attention, the high life of New York City. And it wouldn't be long before he was at the top of it all.
Now, from a real estate standpoint, it's probably become the hottest city in the world. People are flocking here by droves.
Well, they weren't flocking here by droves right away. In fact, when Trump moved to Manhattan, Manhattan was kind of a city in decline. It was full of empty, crumbling buildings, kind of like a faded memory of its glory days. But Trump came in with a huge vision, a huge enthusiasm to resurrect the city at a time when most investors were pretty sheepish about putting their money in this crumbling city. Check out this New York Times feature on Donald Trump around this time. Tall, lean, blonde with dazzling white teeth, a glib, non-stop talker who believes that, quote, New York is either going to get much better or much worse. And he's predicting that it's going to get, quote, much better. It was a pretty good prediction. Over the next decade, Trump used his father's company connections, money, reputation to buy old decaying buildings and give them glitzy renovations.
And we purchased the old Commodore Hotel, and we've reconverted that now into about $110 million Grand Hyatt Hotel.
This includes the purchase of this old department store on Fifth Avenue, atop which he built his signature project, Trump Tower, a 68-story building in Midtown Manhattan. The city kind of loved it. It was a welcome renovation, a unique style of a building, but no one loved it more than Donald Trump himself because he was winning. In a very short time, he had broken away from his life and business in Queens and built a temple unto himself, a physical expression of his love for opulence and status and exclusivity and attention.
Trump Tower, a creation which holds a shopping area where if you have to ask the prices, you don't belong there.
Marble, gold, columns, waterfalls, mahogany woodwork, chandeliers, and for Trump and his family, a massive 3-story penthouse that looks like a European palace had a baby with Las Vegas.
Donald Trump was a New York tabloid fixture. All through the 1980s, Trump was busy building something new, and it wasn't a skyscraper.
Billionaire developer Donald Trump has put his name on a New York City hotel, shopping center, and apartment buildings, as well as a casino in Atlantic City. And now he's going to put his name on a big piece of Eastern Airlines.
Trump was creating a public persona, one that could be both funny and demeaning, arrogant and somehow in touch with the common man.
I sort of love and hate him at the same time. I mean, I think he has, a monumental ego.
He comes off as being very, what's the word I'm looking for?
Arrogant?
Yeah, he's arrogant.
I like him.
You do?
Man's got a name, got everything.
He often did this by picking fights.
He said, I think Donald Trump is an artful liar. I think he is a greedy, vicious, and arrogant man.
Well, I don't know, is that supposed to be a compliment or not? I'm not sure.
He waged a years-long battle with New York City Mayor Ed Koch.
I hope that New York City has a different mayor at some point, because I think Ed Koch is a total disaster. He's been a very bad mayor for the city.
He helped launch a competitor to the NFL called the U.S. Football League, and then launched a lawsuit against the NFL when the USFL failed.
The jury in the case delivered its verdict. It ruled the NFL did indeed monopolize pro football, but it awarded damages of just $1.
Playing the role of an unpredictable bully with the Midas touch, Trump showed he couldn't easily be ignored.
His baseball coach said way back when he was a teen, Trump will do anything to win. Oh, and just let's be clear though, the definition of winning here isn't what most of us think of, which is being the best at something while following the rules that everyone else follows. To Trump, winning means making people think you won, making people think you're worth $100 million, even though you're really worth $5 million. The truth doesn't matter. The perception matters. He gave them the drama that they wanted about his divorces and relationships, and in exchange, he got the attention that he craved and that he used to craft his image. So far this is my list, my interpretation of what motivates this guy, what he really believes, how he thinks, and how he's used that to be successful. First in real estate development, but soon in much, much more.
The man who was the darling of the 80s is seen in the 90s as a man in trouble.
This surely will be my favorite part of the video because it's about to get wild.
There is a new billionaire in town. Trump's the name. Donald Trump is a major deal maker, a swashbuckler.
Throughout the 80s and 90s, Trump's name starts to appear on everything. Trump Magazine, real estate and luxury living.
In your life, you're 33 years old, you're worth all this money. You say you didn't say that you want to be worth $1 billion.
No, I really don't. I just want to keep busy and keep active.
Could $1 billion buy the White House? What do you think?
Well,
Does
I don't
money
think it can. I know a lot of the politicians. I like a lot of the politicians. They're friends of mine.
His own words in 1991 in an Esquire interview, quote, it really doesn't matter what they write, as long as you've got a young, beautiful piece of that.
Donald Trump is the Hugh Hefner of the 90s.
In the 1990s, Donald Trump was building a reputation for himself as a ladies' man.
For an older person, he's very attractive.
He may be the most eligible bachelor in America. Please welcome Donald Trump.
Gone were the days when he was known primarily as the real estate mogul of New York.
Remember the 80s? The yuppies, the buyouts, the junk bonds, and especially the Donald.
The man who was the darling of the 80s is seen in the 90s as a man in trouble, and he knows it.
The drama started when Donald began cheating on his wife, Ivana Trump, with aspiring actress Marla Maples. After an ugly public falling out, Donald and Ivana divorced in 1992, with some reports that Ivana got millions from the split.
Donald Trump's former or current girlfriend, depending on what day it is sharing all her secrets for staying in shape.
Donald eventually married Marla, 2 months after she gave birth to a baby girl. But by the end of the decade, Trump was single again, and he seemed to enjoy the dating scene.
The reputation of Donald Trump, the man who dates a different woman every year.
I don't do that. I mean, I've been with a number of women, but it's been over a fairly long period of time. I've had great relationships with women.
If you could have your choice, who would be the one person you'd date?
Wow.
Or who are the three most beautiful women in the world?
Well, how about Lady Di? That would be an interesting one. She's going to be available.
What kind of woman do you
choice.
like?
I think my choice might be you. Look at the legs on her. Boy.
Can you imagine how controversial I'd be? You think about Clinton with the women. How about me with the women? Can you imagine?
Well, I mean, I think there is a certain controversy to me, and I am single, and I do go out with women.
While his family life may have been on the rocks, his business empire was crumbling.
The headline was quite accurate. Welcome to the 90s, Donald. because it was like he got whacked right in the face. It was amazing.
Trump opened his third casino in Atlantic City in April 1990.
Lasers, fireworks, and miles of neon lights provided the color as Trump opened the Taj Mahal Casino Hotel in Atlantic City.
But just months after it opened, the Taj Mahal missed one of its debt payments, and Trump began looking for a bailout.
His empire could be at risk of collapse if the New Jersey Casino Commission decides not to approve Trump's bailout plan.
By the fall of 1991, all 3 casinos had filed for bankruptcy.
The Jersey Casino Control Commission has unanimously approved Donald Trump's bailout plan. That plan allows him to use his 3 Atlantic City casinos as collateral for his $65 million loan.
In order to finance a loan, Trump was forced to sell off his airline, his yacht, and a chunk of one of his earliest projects, the Grand Hyatt Hotel in Manhattan.
You know, I had a wife who was suing me for $2 billion. I had the banks, I had this, I had that.
He did get to keep one asset, an undeveloped piece of land on Manhattan's west side that Trump had purchased in 1985. Trump had envisioned a huge project on the site, but in 1994, the real estate market fell, leaving Trump unable to make payments on the land. So Trump sold off the lots and made a deal where he got to keep some of the profits from any future development, and to put his name on a few of the buildings, marking a new chapter in which Trump was less of a developer and more of a brand.
Who knows better about hard times than me? I had a company, it was doing well, I had tremendous debt like this country, and in 1990, the whole country, it just went very, very bad.
As his finances stabilized, Trump began to reclaim his status in the public psyche with publicity stunts, like a 1995 Pizza Hut commercial in which he appeared with Ivana Trump.
Doing Ivana.
What do people think?
It's wrong, isn't it?
But it feels so right.
Then it's a deal?
Yeah,
By the end of the decade, he was once again sounding like the Trump of the 80s, talking big about his finances.
Back in the 1990s, you owed something like $900 million. Your empire was pretty
much more than that.
You owed more than that?
975 was personally guaranteed. That was just the small part. That was the harder debt. But I owed many, many billions of dollars. And now my company is much bigger and stronger than it was in the 80s.
And flirting with a presidential run.
Businessman Donald Trump tells Meet the Press that tomorrow he, Trump, is also leaving the Republican Party to join the Reform Party.
He's considered the largest developer in New York.
In 1999, Trump was on the verge of doing something that he had only hinted at in the 80s. He was about to decide whether he could really run for the White House.
Running mate. If you decide to go at this, who would be the ideal running mate for Donald Trump?
Oh, I think Oprah would be great.
Seriously.
I think that probably that would be
Trump's
serious.
image had become his greatest asset, appealing especially to the American middle class. Because even though Trump came from extreme wealth, he presented like an everyman. He was a plain talker, he had an outer borough Queens accent, and yet he had it all: the money, the women, the luxury. And this pull yourself up by your bootstraps reputation of having earned it from the ground up, a Disneyland-esque version of the American dream, which was a mix of half reality and half fantasy. We're used to a lot of this stuff now, celebrities and influencers putting their name on stuff to sell someone else's product. But back in like the 80s, most people would see all of these products and think that like Trump owned all of it, that he had this massive empire with dozens and dozens of products. Leasing his name allowed him to build an empire of products, but without using his own cash. And when these businesses failed, as nearly all of them eventually did, Trump could pocket his profits, cut ties, without facing the fallout of the business folding. Now, let me be clear. I'm not saying that this is illegal or even unethical. If anything, it was smart. I guess my takeaway here is that Trump's main skill wasn't being a businessman in the traditional sense. It was being a marketer, a showman, the sales pitch, the ability to sell himself, and the fantasy that he built around himself. His rise is almost entirely explained by his ability to do that, combined with the fact that he was born and raised with an obscene amount of money to get him started. By the early 2000s, his brand was kind of losing its luster. His business empire starts to kind of decline. His casinos were filing for bankruptcy, and his glory days seemed to be maybe over. But that would change in 2004 when he was able to once again monetize his persona, this time on a reality TV show.
New York City, it's the benchmark for success. Believe me, I know. My name is Donald Trump, and I'm the largest developer in New York.
The concept was the brainchild of the creator of the reality TV show Survivor, and it was pretty brilliant. Trump would be the boss, looking over his vast business empire, and there would be contestants who would compete to impress the big boss enough to get hired. This ended up being a powerful premise for a dramatic show. It was a massive success, bringing in tens of millions of viewers and rejuvenating Trump's persona, actually elevating it. A household name for many Americans who would tune in to watch him act out this role that he had been preparing for his whole life. The showman in the spotlight, entertaining people while also building his brand and his image as a ruthless businessman.
You're fired.
Oh my God, oh my God.
The Apprentice with Trump lasted for 14 seasons and laid the foundation of what would happen next.
I am officially running for President of the United States, and we are going to make our country great again.
Do you have the genes to be a successful politician?
Well, you never really know. I think I'm pretty outspoken, and that's not probably a good thing in terms of a politician, but it's a good thing if you ever got elected, you could really do a job.
You've said, though, that if you did run for president, you believe you'd win.
Well, I don't know. I think I'd win. I tell you what, I wouldn't go in to lose. I've never gone in to lose in my life.
Trump had flirted with running for office a few times before.
On the Republican side, there's speculation that developer Donald Trump may throw his hat into the ring.
But it was only in the 2000s, while he was crafting his image on The Apprentice, that he started to insert himself into politics more and more. Like in 2008, when he challenged whether or not then-candidate Barack Obama was actually an American citizen.
More recently, Donald Trump have questioned President Obama's citizenship.
We have to look at it. We have to see, is it real?
Now, this was an overt display of racism that did not land well with a lot of Americans, and it coincided with a sharp decline in The Apprentice's ratings. Eventually, most of Trump's branded ventures would go on to fold, and once again, he seemed to be on course for being a name of the past. But we know this guy by now. He is fueled by an endless desire to win and be recognized for it, and he had a pretty tried and true playbook to do it. So in 2015, Trump descended an escalator and threw himself into the spotlight that he knows so well. When he was asked later why he decided to run for president, he said, quote, "Because here's the way I look at it. I have so many rich friends, and nobody knows who they are. You must fight for recognition, or you'll end up as someone else's sucker."
Say what you will about Mr. Trump, he certainly would bring some change to the White House.
So he wielded his tireless work ethic and his ability to inflame and divide and lie and lie and lie some more and bully all the way into the limelight. After years of practice on smaller stages, he entered the largest stage of them all and expertly sold the fantasy of being the everyman, despite having never lived like anything but a king. And it worked. He won. He didn't get the most votes, but he still won fair and square. And he became the president of the United States for 4 years. And then, when he lost, he did what he's always done, what we could have predicted he would do. He fought it to the death, attacking the rules of the system that he had lost in, selling his lies to an angry population who believed them, and dealing a blow to the foundations of our fragile democracy. And tens of millions of people continued to love it.
Does knowing more about his background alter your view or shatter any preconceived notions? Does it make it easier to understand his political appeal and why he remains popular despite the relentless, unfavorable press he continues to receive? Let me know in the comments what you think.